The legend of Loftus Hall begins during the 18th century when a man called Charles Tottenham lived at the Wexford mansion. The story goes that a stranger came to the hall looking for a place to stay on a dreadful stormy night. He was invited in by the Tottenhams and they sat down to play cards. During the game, one of the ladies bent down to pick up a card. She was shocked when she saw, underneath the table, a cloven foot. All at once, the stranger vanished through the ceiling with a puff of smoke. Loftus Hall was then exorcised by Father Thomas Broaders, whose powers worked. Father Broaders went on to become parish priest of the parishes of the Hook and Rams Grange for almost 50 years. The building in which the legend is associated was levelled to the ground in 1870 and the present-day mansion was erected. Belvelly Castle sits prominently on the shores of Great Island in County Cork. In the 17th century, a woman called Margaret Hognett lived there. At the time, mirrors were a status symbol with the wealthy, and Margaret was known for her love of these to remind her of her renowned beauty. She had an on-off relationship with a local lord called Clone Rockenby, who asked for her hand in marriage many times, which she refused. Eventually, Rockaby decided that humiliation was enough and raised a small army to go to and take her by force. He thought the Hognetts, used to a luxury life, would not withstand the siege. However, they surprised him by holding out for a full year before surrendering. When he entered the castle, Rockenby was shocked to see the state of Margaret. He found her skeletal and starved, a shadow of her former self, her beauty gone. Out of rage, Rockaby smashed her favourite mirror to pieces. As he did so, one of the Hognetts killed him with a sword. After these events, Margaret descended into insanity. She sought out mirrors constantly to check if her beauty had returned. However, it never did. She died in old age at the castle, and her troubled ghost appeared as a white lady, sometimes with a veiled face and sometimes with no face at all. Those who have seen her say she looks as a spot on the wall, then rubs it as if looking at her reflection. Apparently, one stone on the castle's wall has been rubbed smooth over the years. Perhaps this is the spot where the mirror used to hang. Belvelly has largely been unoccupied since the 19th century, but is currently undergoing renovation. In the area of Cooneen, near the Fermanagh-Tyrone border, sits an isolated abandoned cottage. In 1911, this was the home of the Murphy family, who were apparently victims of poltergeist activity. Mrs. Murphy was a widow who, along with her children, began to hear mysterious noises at night, knocks on the door, footsteps in the empty loft, and unexplained creaks and groans. Then other strange occurrences began, such as plates travelling across tables, seemingly on their own, and bedclothes moving around in empty beds. Soon, more extreme and frequent paranormal activity began to occur, with pots and pans thrown violently against the walls, and furniture elevated from the ground. A coldness permeated the cottage as mysterious shapes appeared and disappeared through the walls. The house became the talk of the area, and neighbours, local clergymen, and a local MP visited, becoming shocked witnesses to the strange events. A Catholic priest from nearby Maguire's Bridge performed 2 exorcisms to absolutely no avail. The haunting continued along with the family's terror. Soon, rumours circulated that the family had somehow brought the demonic activity on themselves. But with no local support, and now in fear of their lives, the Murphys emigrated to America in 1913. But the story did not end there. Apparently, the poltergeist followed them. Their cottage in Cooneen, now a ruin, was never lived in again. Today, visitors say it retains an oppressive atmosphere. In Derry, a district known as Slár Averty, you can find a grassy mound called O'Cahan's Dolmen, marked by a single thorn tree. It is said that a vampire is contained within it. In 5th century Derry, a chieftain known as Abertach, was notorious for his vindictiveness and cruelty towards his own tribe. He had a strange, deformed appearance, and rumours abound that he was an evil wizard. When he died, he realized people had buried him in a manner befitting a man of his rank. However, the day after his burial, his seemingly alive corpse reappeared in his village, demanding a bowl of fresh human blood or else terrible retribution. His terrified former subjects turned to another local chieftain, Khan, and asked that he kill Abertach. Khan killed him 3 times, and after each murder, Abertach's gruesome corpse came creeping back to the village, searching for the blood. Finally, Cahalan consulted a holy Christian hermit for guidance. He ordered Abertach be killed using a wooden sword made of yew, buried head downwards and weighed with a heavy stone. Finally, he ordered the planting of a thorn bush tightly in a circle around the burial site. On following these instructions, Khan at last confined Abertach to his grave. To this day, the locals there avoid the mound, especially after dark. King Henry II of England had Malahide Castle built in the 1100s, and the place boasts many hauntings. In its early days, opulent medieval feasts were held there. Such events would not be complete without minstrels and jesters providing entertainment. One of the jesters, nicknamed Puck, is thought to haunt the castle. The story goes that Puck saw a lady prisoner at a feast and fell in love with her. Perhaps while trying to help her escape, guards stabbed him to death outside the castle, and in his dying breath vowed to haunt the place forever. There have been many sightings of him, and many visitors say they have seen him and photographed his spectred features appearing in the thick ivy that grows on the walls. Places such as Malahide Castle seem to be magnets for strange and paranormal activity. Many have noted other supernatural occurrences in its long history. In more recent years, a portrait of a lady dressed in white had hung in the great hall of the castle. At night, her ghostly figure walks out of the painting and wanders through the halls. Might she have also been seeking Puck out to rescue her from prison? Mr. Mullen, sometime grocer in Bride Street, was left a widower with the charge of several children, some of them young girls, and very soon after their mother's death steps began to be heard upstairs and downstairs, and chiefly into the nursery. Great alarm and fright prevailed, and the maid and the children appealed to the master of the house, who pooh-poohed their fears. They suspected, however, from his own careworn looks, that he had also received disagreeable visits. The poor children began to lose natural cheer of youth, and to be found with scared looks, especially towards night. And little wonder, for steps were constantly heard pacing across the nursery, and sometimes they would be conscious, from the low sound of breathing and sighing, that someone was standing beside their beds. One night, when the maid was following Mr. Mullen upstairs from the cellar, she distinctly saw a small man with a red cap on, following close on her master's steps, and holding him by the skirts of his coat. This was the only appearance, and it was the most remarkable, as all were of opinion that it was the spirit of the mother, who was showing her anxiety for her daughters in this disagreeable way. At last, as Anne O'Neill, the maid, was one evening sitting in the kitchen table, employed at drying and drawing out laces and frills with her Italian iron on the table before her, and the master sitting on the other side and smoking, she was sensible of the presence of her late mistress passing close by her in the direction of the fire, and could distinguish the words said in a whisper, "Ochone, Ochone, Ochone." "Oh, master," said she, "did you hear that?" "What, you fool?" said he. "Oh, my mistress's ghost passing by me and moaning." "It's all imagination," said he, but he spoke in a vexed tone. "I don't encourage the children in these nonsensical whims." That night, the eldest daughter, who commonly seemed in more terror than her sisters, was sleeping next to Anne O'Neill. She was all at once wakened up, and became conscious of some awful presence. A cold perspiration burst out all over her, and she tried to cry out, but was not able. In this state, she received 3 severe slaps on the shoulder and fell into a swoon. The father, hearing in the morning what had happened, made up his mind to abandon the house as soon as he could, and in a few weeks was settled in Dorset Street. The persecution or warning, or wherever it was, did not follow the family to their new residence. Some of the persons who experienced the domestic visitations are said to have been known to the writer, and were persons who could not wilfully tell a falsehood. On the Coolria Peninsula in Sligo, William Phibbs built a stately mansion known variously as Seafield or Lisheen House. The mansion overlooked the sea, and with over 20 rooms it stood out as an opulent symbol, built at the height of the Great Famine by a man who was a cruel and unsympathetic landlord. By the early 20th century, his descendant, Owen Phibbs, housed a collection of Egyptian artifacts, including mummies, at the house. Seemingly, this stimulated the activity of a violent poltergeist. According to some servants, the house often shook and objects would smash into the walls at random. A ghostly horse-drawn coach rumbled up the avenue at night only to disappear at the entrance door. Several exorcisms were conducted at the house, yet the activity did not cease. The Phibbs family strongly denied the haunting, as it became difficult to retain servants, and no one knows what prompted them to leave abruptly in 1938, never to return. Agents organized for all the house contents, even the roof, to be sold. It is now a ruin, covered in wild Atlantic ivy, occasionally visited by those interested in its paranormal history.